Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. I want to talk about day 2 of the convention. But first, I want to tell a quick story here. Jesse Brown and Tom Hudner. These are 2 people that we need to know. Jesse was born in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, 1926, son of a sharecropper. He lived in a shack, dirt floors, worked in the fields all day. Just imagine that hot, disgusting, humid Mississippi air, working all day out in the sun, no break. What could his future ever be? How would he even know what else his life could be? He was a little boy, and one day an airplane flew overhead, and he learned that there were such things as a fighter pilot. And he told his parents that he wanted to be a fighter pilot when he grew up, and they laughed at him. Lovingly so. They laughed, and they said, Jesse, they won't let a black person in an airplane, let alone fly them in the Navy. And Jesse Brown became the first black fighter pilot in Navy history. Enter Tom Hudner. Tom Hudner, born in an upper-class family in Massachusetts. His house had a floor. Tom's grandfather owned grocery stores. They belonged to a country club. Tom was supposed to go to Harvard, just like his dad, inherit the family business, live a comfortable, safe life. But against his family's wishes, he wanted to be a fighter pilot in the Navy. So Jesse and Tom, from completely opposite backgrounds and childhoods, became best friends in the Navy. Fast forward to the Korean War. There are 6 pilots in the air. They're in over what's today North Korea. Jesse's plane gets hit. He has to crash into the side of a mountain, or he does crash in the side of a mountain in what's today's North Korea. It's a violent crash onto a frozen mountaintop. Jesse gets knocked out. He wakes up, takes off his helmet and gloves and tries to open up the canopy to get out. And he realizes he's stuck. His legs are stuck. He can't get out. And then he drops his helmet out of the plane, so he has no communication now. And the other pilots are flying overhead, and they see Jesse waving to him. And Tom looks down and he sees not only his friend, but he sees Jesse's wife and Jesse's 2-year-old daughter. So Tom, in that moment, decides to do something that no one's ever done before and no one's ever done since. He crash landed a perfectly good airplane right next to his friend to try and save his life. So Tom crashed on purpose, escaped his plane, ran to Jesse, and could not pull him out. He found an axe in the plane and tried to cut and just hack at the side of the plane, but the metal was frozen solid. And Jesse was dying and freezing. So Tom took off his hat and scarf to help Jesse stay warm best he could. Helicopter finally came, landed next to them. It was getting dark. And the pilot yelled to Tom, he said, Tom, you have 2 choices. You can either stay here and die with Jesse, or you can come with me right now. But I gotta go right now. Imagine being there in that moment. What do? Hardest decision of Tom's life, but before he could even say anything, Jesse says, Tom, tell my wife how much I love her. And the helicopter took off. Before Jesse left for war, he told his wife, Daisy, he said, Daisy, promise me, if I die, that you will go to school and become a school teacher. So she went to school to become a teacher. But then Jesse's mother died, and Daisy quit school to take care of his dad. She had no money left to do both. At the same time, Tom's hometown in Massachusetts held a parade for him. And they collected money from everyone in town, and they gave Tom a $1,000 check. He gave that check to Daisy to go back to school. This story to me screams America, right? This is, if I had to put America into one story, this is it. the unity of purpose that these two, by every other metric, different men had. Their friendship and purpose transcended race and every other difference. Their connection, their devotion, the sacrifice, their true, deep, profound brotherly love. That right there is America. In 4 minutes and 30 seconds, that's America. That is who we are. Slater, why did you share that story? If I were given a speech at the GOP convention, or I don't care if I was helping somebody give it or whatever, this is, I would share that story, and then this is when I would show videos of the riots across the country. I'd show videos of people beating other people unconscious. There's a video from last night in Kenosha of all places, where rioters are burning down a guy's store. So a 70-year-old man, I don't know if he owned this, I think he worked there, but a 70-year-old man was trying to put the fire out. He had a fire extinguisher, he was trying to put it out. And someone came up from behind him and punched him in the face, broke his jaw. 70-year-old man laying on the ground, passed out. It's in Kenosha. So this is when I would show that video, and I would say, this is not who we are. These are Democrat-run cities being burned to the ground by products of a Democrat-run school system and a progressive culture that says everyone's racist, our history is racist, capitalism is evil, God isn't real, and nothing's worth living for. This is the result. What you just saw right there. You just saw a guy, you just saw a 20-year-old, whatever, sucker punch a 70-year-old man who's trying to put out a fire in his store. All right? That is a progressive culture that says your envy is justified because you're a victim and oppressed. Therefore, everything and anything that you want to do to feel good is okay. So that's a future that we can double down on. If you vote for Biden, and if you thought you were safe because you don't live in Portland, you don't live in crazy Seattle, I'm certain that last week the people of Kenosha did not think that their city would be burned to the ground. I guarantee you the 70-year-old man who turned on the news every once in a while and saw the crazy psychos in Portland, guarantee you that he did not think he would get punched in the face by one of these same people. So if you want more of that, you know exactly who you need to vote for. I'd show the video of the woman, it's like a couple days ago in DC. This is a new thing now where people go around and they go to restaurants and they force people to raise their fist in the air for whatever reason here. Do we have a video of this? You've probably seen it by now. Crazy. So everyone else in the restaurant has their fists up in the air in support. And that's the one woman who won't. And my understanding is that that woman actually supports them. She just didn't like the whole scene, right? She didn't like being forced to do it and the whole thing, right? The mob thinks that you're weak. That mob thinks that you're a coward. And they think that they can shame you into following them in their destruction. But that is not who we are in America. And you may not think you're voting for that when you're voting for Biden, but you're enabling that. I'll give you a very real way, like just pure policy. Last night, I live in San Diego. Last night, like right down the street from where I used to live, 33-year-old was released from prison 80 days before when he was supposed to be released, and this was done to stop the spread of COVID. And on the beach, he randomly murdered some 36-year-old guy, just stabbed him in the neck. The guy was walking in the bathroom, came up behind him, stabbed him in the neck, no reason whatsoever. I didn't have to go hunt for that story, right? That happened yesterday. No cash bail, early release, defund the police, all this stuff. And this is real policy that Joe Biden and his people are fighting for. I don't make that up. You don't have to make up the dozens of people who are shot every night in Chicago and cities all across the country. Vote for Biden, you're going to get more of that. Vote for me, you're going to get more of this. What's this? Now you go into the naturalization ceremony. Did you see that? And this is great. This is a great idea to have the naturalization ceremony, the citizenship ceremony. There are 5 immigrants from all around the world. It was a beautiful scene. Have you ever been to one of these things before? Oh man, if they ever do these again because of COVID, you have to go. They are so much fun, these naturalization ceremonies. And everyone's so proud to be an American, obviously. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. So you got these 5 people, but Trump just said like a 10-second thing about each of them. And you're like, no, man, you totally missed that chance. You got to give each of those people just a minute or two to talk about why they love America and why one guy came from Bolivia, one person came from India, and all these other places. Why? Why did you come to America? Why do you love America? These are 5 people who left their birthland to be an American. There's no Americans leaving America to become Bolivian. Why? Because this is the greatest country on earth, and no one can speak to that more than these 5 immigrants, perhaps. So let them speak. This is who we are, not Biden and Antifa and riots in the cities. Because it's like, couldn't be more clear. But we whiffed, the Republicans whiffed it all day yesterday. I gave them a chance on the first day. I thought they blew it on the first day too, but I was like, oh, okay, first day, we'll let Charlie Kirk speak or Congressman Gates. No, what are you guys doing? Kellyanne Conway speaking at the convention. What are you guys doing with this? This is the greatest country on earth. You got to share the stories. I met a World War II veteran years ago, Bud Fink. I'll never forget Bud. What a guy. Bud was just a gentleman, World War II vet. He was a perfect, like he was exactly what you think of when you think of our World War II veterans. Passed away just a couple years ago. And he shared the story of his parents leaving Ukraine and hiking across the continent. They made it to Amsterdam. They got on the back of a shipping container to New York City. They worked their way up to middle class. I mean, it'd be super poor by today's standards. And Bud tells a story that one day he was on his front porch with his dad, and he said something critical. He was just a little boy, and he said something critical about America. And his dad said, son, these streets are paved with gold. And young Bud, he said, all right, Dad, whatever. His dad lifted him up from the back of the collar, literally picked him up and dragged him into the middle of the actual street and said, son, look at this street. This street is paved with gold. You can do anything you want in America. Look at us. We have a business. We have a house. You're going to school. These streets are paved with gold. I share these stories. These are just 2 stories because Republican conservatives have all the good stories and are terrible at telling them. Every 4 years I complain about this. Every 4 years I complain about the GOP convention, how terrible it is, how disappointing it is, full of missed opportunities. And I make the same points because they make the same mistakes. And then all these Republicans email me and rebuke me. Oh, Slater, how dare you say a negative thing about Republicans? Yeah, I say it because I want to do better. I didn't say anything about the Democratic convention because I don't care about the Democratic convention. I'm saying a lot about the Republican convention because I care about it, because I care about our message and this unbelievable opportunity that we have every 4 years to tell the story of America and tell who we are as conservatives, and we blow it. You have Kellyanne Conway give a speech. And I totally understand it sounds like I'm complaining for the sake of complaining, but I'm not. It's because I know there's so much potential. And then people send me these emails like, oh, well, what about this moment? And you're like, okay, fine. There's a slight little moment where they told an okay story. But here's the problem. I don't even know what their objective is. If their objective is to pat each other on the back and talk about how great Republicans are to fellow Republicans, then yeah, it was a great convention. But if the goal is to reach new people and to reach the unreached and reach undecided and reach people in the middle and reach blue dog Democrats and people just to the left and people who are maybe on the left but upset about all the rioting and everything, if your goal is to reach them, you're like not even close. The left is really good at telling stories about America. The problem is they're all lies, but they're really good at telling them. Conservatives have all the good stories, but they're terrible at telling them. Instead, we just hear, so because of that, we just hear about what a racist, evil, terrible, rooted and founded on racist country we are. And it's all a lie. And if we don't actively counter that, then we'll lose not only the election, but way more than that. I'll take a break. I'll come back. There were 2 moments in particular that were sort of close to what needs to be done. But the whole point is, don't tell me something. Show it to me. Show it to me. Don't tell me more economic numbers. I don't need to know how the economy was doing good before COVID hit. Bring the woman from Chicago who started her business 40 years ago and had to shut down because of COVID, but then got destroyed because of rioters and just wants law and order again. Have her come out and share her story. Who thought we needed to hear from all the Trump kids? Right? Don't give me that. Who wants to hear from them? I want to hear from the people who are out there, the real people who have real stories to share. Let me take a break. I'll give you some examples of this and what this could have looked like. All right, do that next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. I know you're thinking, all right, Slater, enough whining. Give me some examples of what you're talking about. All right, here's two. This is some good attempts at storytelling. This is Herschel Walker from The First Day.
I watched him in the boardroom. He can be in the middle of a big meeting, but if one of the kids was on the phone, he dropped everything to take the call. He taught me that the family should be your top priority. I watched him treat janitors, security guards, and waiters the same way he would treat a VIP. He made them feel special because he knew they were. He understands that they are the people who make this country run. They clean, they cook, they build, they drive, they deliver. He told me, Herschel, make an effort to get to know people. Remember their names. That stuck with me. One time, I planned to take his kids to Disney World with my family. At the last minute, Donald said he'd like to join us. So there he was, in a business suit, on It's a Small World ride. That was something to see. It just shows you what a caring, loving father he is. It hurt my soul to hear the terrible names that people call Donald. The worst one is racist. I take it as a personal insult that people would think I've had a 37-year friendship with a racist. People who think that don't know what they're talking about. Growing up in the Deep South, I've seen racism up close. I know what it is, and it isn't Donald Trump.
Great. What was the most human moment of that clip we just played right there? The most human moment was when he genuinely smiled when he was telling the story about Disney World. And he genuinely smiled and he said, and there he was in a business suit riding It's a Small World ride, right? So it's because he went off teleprompter for a second. The teleprompter is just the death of all these speeches. It kills the speech. That was the one moment in his speech when he got off prompter for a second. And it just brought the connection between the speaker, him, and the audience like this. We're just like this for a second. When he said, it's a small world ride, and gave this big smile, and you had this perfect visual of Donald Trump doing that. That's the power of story. And I've heard very, very few of these. So just a suggestion to maybe have even made that better. In the beginning there, we're talking about how Donald Trump, knows all the janitors and stuff like that. You got to share an example, right? So how much better would it have been? Herschel, he goes, man, it was 1986, and we were in Trump Tower, and we were walking in the basement hallway, and there was a janitor there. I didn't even see him. And Donald said, hey, Charlie, how's the family? Oh, family's doing real good. Really, how's your wife? Well, the surgery went great, Mr. Trump. Thanks for asking. Man, Charlie, that is great to hear. I hope your daughter and son, Mary and Charlie Jr., I hope they're doing great in college. Keep up the good work. And Herschel Walker, he'd be like, man, do you you know him? And Trump says, oh, yeah, man, that's Charlie. He's been a janitor for 10 years. He's a good man. Lives over in Staten Island. He's whatever, right? And show the story. And then talk about how Trump knew everyone who worked in Trump Tower. And this man loves working class people of this country because at his heart, he's one too. So it's a perfect example of don't just tell. Now that's good. It's a good thing to tell that Trump, connects with and knows the janitors and everything. But show it. Show the story. I'll give you another example. Pompeo spoke last night as the Secretary of State. And he had this line. He said, in China, he's pulled back the curtain. That's a stupid line. Pulled back the curtain on the predatory aggression of the Chinese Communist Party. Lame. What kind of sentence is that? Who in a real life conversation says, pulled back the curtain on the predatory aggression. Like that, what is that? Don't tell, say, show the story. Have Pompeo get out there and be like, guys, listen, American people, I'll never forget this. We were in China and we were meeting with the president and we had all the Chinese important delegation all around this table. And the president of China said something bad about America. Said that we're no longer the strongest nation on earth or something. And the president stood up and said, Mr. President, you don't understand America. And you will never understand what makes America great and why America is the greatest country on earth. And we're not going to let you manipulate us anymore. And the Chinese delegation was shocked. They were speechless. They didn't know what to do. But then they had so much respect for President Trump because never had an American president defended their country like that before. I don't know. I made that story up. I don't know. But see how much better that is than Trump moved the curtain of the delegation. Like, no one talks like that. Tell the story. I hear people, I think it was Don Jr., talked about how Trump shut down travel from China early on. Okay, don't tell me it. Show it to me. Tell the story. I went to the Situation Room with my dad. It was February 27th. I'll never forget it. And everyone around the table said, you can't shut down travel from China. And my dad, he stood up and he said, you guys just don't get it. You don't get it. The Chinese are liars, and we got to defend the American people. And I know it seems like a hard choice, but it's really not. This is the right thing to do. And I'll never forget my dad when he said that. It was so powerful, so confident, and it was unpopular. But he did it. And at the time, Biden said he was racist for doing it. But surely he saved countless lives because of it. See how much better that is? Rand Paul did a good job with this. This was a bit from his speech yesterday.
I was planning a medical mission trip to Guatemala to perform charity eye surgeries, and we needed money to fund the trip. Donald Trump offered to help and immediately came through for us. Not only did he support my medical mission to Guatemala, but he also contributed to another mission trip to Haiti a year later. We performed hundreds of cataract surgeries in both countries. Nothing is more amazing than removing the bandages from a person's eyes and watching them as they see their loved ones again. Donald Trump helped me make that happen.
Why do stories... Did you know that, by the way? Did you know that story? Did you know that President Trump donated, before he was president, donated money to Rand Paul's mission trip in Haiti? Like, I didn't know that. That's what I'm talking about. That's why stories matter. We're going to do a special on Friday. The whole special about morality. All right, we're going to talk to someone about classical morality. We're going to talk to someone about biblical morality. And then we're going to wrap up with Wilfred McClay. He's the author of a new textbook for high schoolers about the American story. It's this wonderful textbook. It's the opposite of the 1619 Project. And I saw a speech that he gave at Hillsdale College about the importance of story. And he quoted this guy, Isaac Bashevis Singer. He said, when a day passes, it's no longer there. What remains of it? Nothing more than a story. If stories weren't told or books weren't written, men would live like the beasts, only for the day. The whole world, all of human life is one long story. And McClay said that meaning that you get from a story, it's not a luxury. Meaning is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And without it, we perish. And he had this analogy. He said, historical consciousness, so understanding our history, is to civilized society what memory is to individual identity. Right? If you don't have a memory, then you don't know who you are. An example, my dad passed away maybe 6 years ago. He passed away before my son was born, my first son, Jack, who's 3.5 now. But my dad, we only have a few things from my dad. And one of the things we have is my dad's hat when he was a Cub Scout. And we have my dad's bow and arrow when he was a camper, a little bit, maybe like a 12-year-old boy. Jack, my son, he wears my dad's hat, his grandpa's hat, almost every day. It's grandpa's hat. He's never seen grandpa. He doesn't know grandpa, but he has this connection with grandpa. Actually, there's 3 things. So we have the hat. In Jack's room, the kids' room, we framed a blueprint that my dad drew of the house that I grew up in. And Jack knows that grandpa drew that. It's right next to his bed. And then the bow and arrows. And we recently read Robin Hood as a family, and Jack and Grace, they love Robin Hood. Right? And the idea that Grandpa also had a bow and arrow. Wow. Robin Hood had a bow and arrow, and Grandpa had a bow and arrow. That blows Jack's mind. Like, he can't even, it's a bow and arrow that one day, Jack, like, you can use this arrow too, right? You work hard, you obey mommy and daddy, you become more like the character of Robin Hood, then you too can use Grandpa's bow and arrow. Wow, like that's magic. These stories, they connect us to our past and they define us today. Your memories define you. Your family history defines you, either in a good way or it's something you need to overcome, right? Your family history, but still, even then, that still defines you. It's all essential. And the same is true of the American story. And the left knows this, right? The left knows this. This is why they want to attack it, right? Do you think the attack on the founding of America was an accident from the left? The 1619 Project attacking, redefining America's founding, you think that was an accident? No way, it was a direct hit. And our schools are so controlled by progressives today, they just let it right in. They didn't even need a Trojan horse cover for it. They just opened the gates to it. And there was no one there to stop it. Now, of course, we're going to try to root it out of our schools, but that's way harder than ever stopping it in the first place. And that's our fault for giving these spaces over to progressives in the first place. Anyway, point is, if the left can change our story into that we're a rotten, no good, racist country, and if there could be no such thing as truth anymore, only perspectives. So is it even really worth knowing our history? And if we continue to bombard kids with, as Wilfred McClay calls it, the excessive wave of daily events, which I get so frustrated by because young kids have no ability to tie it to anything in our past. They have no ability to frame it all properly in their brains because they don't know our history. But if you're doing all these things and you're a country that's literally walking around like someone who has no memory of how to do anything, how to walk, how to talk, who anyone is, what anything is, how to use a fork, how to chew, how to put clothes on, what a toilet is. And do you see the analogy? And you're maybe thinking of someone with Alzheimer's, and you've had that in your life. It's a terrible thing. But at least that person with Alzheimer's has maybe a caretaker there to help them with their best interests in mind. We're a country that has Alzheimer's with a caretaker who's trying to steal your money. Now, the analogy is off the rails here a bit here, but you get the point. It's so important for all of us to hone up on our history, because that's how we know who we are. Aristotle, in his book Metaphysics, the very first line is, the human mind stretches itself out to know. There's another translation that says all men by nature desire to know, but I like the first translation better. The human mind stretches itself out to know. Know what? We want to know about ourselves. And the best way to do that is through story. And we're letting the left write it. And this week at the convention was an opportunity, is still, I guess, 2 more days of an opportunity to write it properly. And I don't think we've taken it well. True story. Thanks, Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I would just like to beat this dead horse for a few more minutes before we get to our next guest. I want to talk about postmodernism. So here is a definition of postmodernism. It is an attitude of skepticism, rejection of grand narratives. That's the one I really want to focus on. Ideologies in universalism, including objective notions of reason, human nature, social progress, absolute truth, and objective reality. That is postmodernism. So let's break these down real quick. Grand narratives is the big one, right? This is the one that we've been talking about all day today. This is the 1619 Project, right? This is the difference between the grand narrative. So on my radio show, we're going to do this on the TV one of these days. I've been going through the history of democracy. We're going to do a little bit of this with our next guest too. The history of democracy in Greece, the beginnings of the Roman Republic, the beginnings, or what happened that caused the Magna Carta, what really happened that sparked our revolution, right? These are part of our grand narrative of America. This is who we are as Americans. And every single aspect of the grand narrative of America is under attack. Every single part, starting with Columbus to Martin Luther King. Susan B. Anthony last week was deemed a racist, right? So no one's safe. The left, they're changing the grand narrative. And it's the shared narrative that allows people to exist peacefully together. Humans aren't designed to live in a tribe this big, right? This is a huge, 330 million people is a big tribe. That's very diverse. We have no like racial unity or like, right? So we need something, right? We're not like the Japanese, right? They have a unity in we're all Japanese. We don't have that in America. So we need something bigger than that. We need a grand narrative to keep us united to each other. And to call those into question, the grand narrative of America, to call that into question is no joke. And that's what's happening. And that's what I wish the Republicans were doing a better job of restoring this week. That's why I got so frustrated. So anyway, that's the grand narrative. I just want to share that because it's a part of postmodernism, which is what we're living in right now. I got a few minutes here. Let me go through the other ones real quick. So postmodernists also reject the idea that objective reality exists at all. Right, try that for a destabilizing force. Right? There's no such thing as objective reality. There's no such thing as reason. So if there's no such thing as reason or objective reality, how can you come to a conclusion about anything? Douglas Murray did an interview the other day, and he said, back in the day, right, if you wanted to make an assertion, you had to prove it. Right? You can't just say the police are the KKK without proving it. And if you can prove it, then we agree, then we come to an agreement, we figure it out. But if you can't prove it, then you can keep saying it, I guess. It's just that you'll be recognized as a liar and a fraud. And this method that we used to have, the scientific method has worked really well. It's why Western societies have been in every way as successful as we've been. Why are we going through a period of particular pain at the moment? It's not because people are stupider than they were. It's because people are making significant headway who have abandoned and want everyone else to abandon this method. I think people should realize that this is what's at stake. What's at stake is the means by which we settle disputes through the modern era. And that we have people coming along and saying, oh, it doesn't matter what the facts are. I have my own facts. And facts are whatever you want them to be. That's a problem. So we have no grand narrative. There's no reality. There's no human nature. There's no such thing as reason. The human nature thing. So the communists thought that there was no innate human nature. And it's a very postmodern thing today, too. But the communists believe that. And because they believe that, they could then say, I can make you into whatever I want. You don't have a human nature, so I'm going to make you a human nature. And that's a problem because it replaces human nature with someone's theory of human nature. And if you think you have a theory for human nature, then you're an arrogant totalitarian, which will result in the death of hundreds of millions of people, which we have seen in the entire 20th century. And the left today says there's no such thing as human nature. It's a very dangerous game when you don't recognize the reality of human nature. So that's what the postmodernists have done so far. They've changed the grand narrative, right? You're only your lived experience. There's nothing that unites us, and anything that does exist in our past is just racist and horrible anyway. They've convinced people that objective reality doesn't exist. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. It's an example that ticks me off. There's no such thing as reason, right? Oh, the reason, that's just objective linear thinking. That's just a white man's colonial construct, right? Don't use reason to settle anything. What do we use? Your feelings. And then you get rid of human nature. So now what are you? Now what are we? What do you think is going to be next after that? There's no unity. There's only division. It's only an atomized society, like made up of little tiny atoms. And an atomized society is a violent society. The Republicans have 2 more days, right? They've blown it the first 2 days. They have 2 more days to clearly outline the grand narrative of America and tell people to hop on board. The grand narrative, there's a couple different ways you can do this, but we are a country born out of rebellion to tyranny, dedicated to the self-evident idea that God endowed us with our rights, and we, the people, created a government to protect those rights. And while we haven't been perfect, we're always aspiring to an ideal. We were born from people seeking religious freedom who formed a country based on the individual and the family and faith. There was no aristocracy, there was no clergy, it was all you and your family. Property rights, free enterprise, voluntary association, independent towns. That's America. Beauty is objective. Truth is objective. Our job is to uncover it. Reason is greater than feelings, and human nature is sinful. And thank God for the saving grace of Jesus. That is our story. Hop on board, people. Or else you can join the people in Kenosha and Portland. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I want to go right to our next guest. He is a historian and writer. He's got a new book called A Changing World, Patriotism Against a Globalist Agenda. Cesar Vidal. Mr. Vidal, how are you, sir?
Fine, thank you. I am very glad of being with you in the next minutes.
Oh, thank you. So we only have 10, unfortunately, and we got a ton to cover here, as your book does. But let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about democracy. Can you help us understand how fragile of a thing it really is? I think we in America, we're just used to it because it's all I've ever known. How fragile is it?
It's true. There's a lot of people thinking that democracy is strong and eternal. This is totally false. And history shows that democracy is very frail and it unluckily is not eternal. It's very interesting that the inventors of democracy, the Athenians, this was 6 centuries before Christ, were very clear that democracy could end, and it was ended. And the reasons were very clear and are the same reasons that right now. For example, Aristophanes, an incredible comedian in Athens, was telling, the problem with democracy is the ideal politician to this democracy right now is the crook. And the crook is the politician who makes a lot of promise and expends a lot of money to convince people to vote for him. So that democracy is frail because a lot of people think not in the common good, but in my good, in my interest, and they accept to vote for a crook politician. And of course, this is very clear also when you have in the democracy some kind of circumstance the Athenians call orge. Orge is wrath, is hate, and the politicians who use the wrath, the hate among the population are politicians who are going to destroy the democracy. So that when you add up the lies, the false promise, the incredible intervention of the state to get the money to give to the clients, the electoral clients, and you add up the hate, you are going to see a democracy with a very small future ahead.
Well, it's amazing that the founders of democracy in Athens knew that. So they didn't go in all doe-eyed thinking this was going to be a perfect thing. They didn't even think it would last forever. They knew the downfall of it, right?
No, in fact, the Greeks were very negative in their views of democracy because they have seen the democracy and they have seen how the demagogues and the crook politicians and the public expense were growing and growing, so that neither Aristotle, nor Xenophon, nor Plato were partisans in favor of democracy. They were very critical. And I think this is a real problem right now. We can see over all the world these politicians telling, vote for me and I'm going to give you this and this. And people are ignorant. They think, that's wonderful. This is a kind of lottery if we have this kind of government. And they are destroying the democracy because the freedom is reduced, the freedom is substituted by a state intervention, and you are taking the money of the people not for the good of the people. You are taking the money because you need to give money to your clients, to your electoral clients, so that democracy ends. And this is very real. And this is not so far from us like ancient Greece. You must see Europe, you must see, for example, Latin America, and you know that democracies disappear. There was a democracy in Germany in the 30s when Hitler came to power. There was a parliamentary democracy in Italy in the 20s when Mussolini came to power. So that, well, of course, democracies are frail. You must take care of them, and you cannot play with democracy because you're going to destroy it.
It's amazing how we are so arrogant to believe that we are so different from those democracies you mentioned, or so enlightened now that we will have it forever. And that's so obviously not true. There's so much more to talk about there. Let me leave that to your book. Let's jump to maybe, I don't want to say the end of the story, but at least what the great force of today is globalism. It sounds like a pretty conspiratorial, kind of crazy thing, Mr. Vidal, right? When people talk about globalism, like, oh, okay, globalism. But it's a real threat. How do you define it?
Well, I'm going not to talk about the reptilians or the Raelians or the Illuminati or something. So
that's what I really wanted you to get to. Darn it!
This is very preposterous to me. But let me quote David Rockefeller in his memoirs. He's telling, some even believe we, the Rockefellers, are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One word, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it. These are the words themselves of David Rockefeller. So that globalism is an agenda that tries to end up the nation states working since 18th century and have one word under a secret cabal. And these are the words of Rockefeller. It's not a kind of conspiranoic idea. And I think this is very clear because Rockefeller is writing this quote in the beginning of the chapter of his memoirs when he's talking about how I have helped to advance this globalist agenda. And he talks about the trilateral, he's talking about the Bilderberg Club, he's talking about the Council of Foreign Affairs, etc., etc. And I think he's very candid talking about this. So that I think that globalism is trying to destroy the political structures that we know right now. Of course, Argentina or US or Great Britain are going to be Argentina, US, and Great Britain, but they're going to be like an egg that you have made a hole and you have taken everything within the egg and you have only the exterior part of the egg. This is the plan of globalism, and of course, this is related to economics, to society, to institutions, and of course, even the way people are going to think in the future.
I don't see why it wouldn't happen. It seems to me to be a natural digression, right? So if America started off first as a hyper-local township, well, first the family and then the town, and we, over the hundreds of years, have given more and more responsibility to the federal government, I don't see why our federal government wouldn't just continue with that and give more and more responsibility to whatever, the UN, the World Health Organization, whatever these large international groups are, right? Why would we not just continue down that path? But I think my last question for you, Mr. Vidal, is what is it about human nature that would cause us to go down that path? Why are we wanting to do this? Why is anyone wanting to do this?
Well, I think that there are people who think that a big power, a big brother, using the term of George Orwell, is going to guarantee our happiness from the cradle to the grave. As the former socialist said, this is totally false. If you see the crisis of the coronavirus, you can see that the supranational international powers have done very bad, even worse than national powers. This is the truth. So that the utopia about a big power giving happiness is totally false. But at the same time, I think that the globalist agenda is attacking very important points in our society. I must say the natural constitution of our society. And the globalist agenda is attacking, well, first, the national identity of the countries, so that we're going to destroy the idea of culture and the idea of nationality. And this is very advanced, for example, in the European Union right now, is less advanced in US, but anyway, on the road. Second one, we're going to destroy the families, because the family is the natural trench against any kind of catastrophe. You can have revolution, you can have wars, you can have, well, the fall down of Wall Street, and the family is the point of resistance, is giving the help to individual to face wars, revolutions, cracks, etc., so that we must destroy the family. And third, we're going to destroy the persons who have a Christian cosmovision, because the Christian cosmovision is defending the family, is defending life, and is defending freedom. And these three areas are really hateful areas for the globalist agenda. And we're going to offer people to accept this. Well, we're going to touch their hearts, so that we're going to tell, well, it's wonderful, the homosexual marriage, because people love each other. It's wonderful if a woman destroy the life that is in her womb because she is free right now, etc., etc. So that we are appealing to feelings and also telling people, well, don't be afraid, don't worry, because you're going to live a secure and happy life. And this is a total lie.
Yeah, so good. A changing world, patriotism against a globalist agenda. You should go get the book, Cesar Vidal. Mr. Vidal, let's talk again, sir. Thanks for your insight.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure to share these minutes with you.
Yeah, have a wonderful day, sir. Keep spreading that message. True story. Mike Slater. See you tomorrow. Spread the word.